So it seems that the twisted and fickle gods of Games Workshop balance updates have smiled on the Chaos Space Marines once more. Seems that Chaos Space Marines are going to be going from tame to rather terrifying, with some big boosts to a whole number of different units. Let's talk about what they've got. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Chaos Marines, and in this video I thought it would be good to take a focused look on the Chaos Space Marine balance update, which perhaps has them as the single biggest winner out of the entire points changes, and seems like quite a good feels good change and underwhelming faction going forward to be very strong again. Chaos Space Marines have certainly been a bit up and down since 10th edition came out. Their faction rule with their dark packs and then doubling down on it with the marks of chaos is a very powerful one, certainly gives them massive damage output, and it seems they flew a bit too close to the sun with the last balance update with things like Forge Fiends, Obliterators, and Chosen just destroying enemies off the board. They took a broad battery of nerfs to all sorts of aspects of their codex, and that cut their win rate down to around about 44% average, players tending to struggle with them more than most other factions. Still, despite that, they had a couple of big tournament wins. They can still put out some big damage, and if you're very careful with the units and getting them killed only when there's no other choice, they certainly can take apart other enemy armies pretty easily, and they do still have some powerful stratagems despite the nerfs. In this balance update, the changes from the previous balance data state remain the same. Dark Obscuration only goes out to 18 inches. The 1CP Profane Zeal stratagem is only for undivided units and only does wound rerolls, not hit rolls anymore, though it's still good. You can't mix marks in transports anymore, so no more undivided chosen in Nurgle Rhinos. And Accursed Cultists are only OC1 and only regenerate in your turn. For the most part, they really haven't been seeing anywhere near as much play between those changes and the points update. Besides that though, there were quite a lot of similar units hitting the table. Chosen in Rhinos was still a thing, Obliterators and Forge Fiends still usable, though admittedly maybe a bit more variety in the units being run, perhaps a little bit more focus on skirmish units. In any case, as mentioned today though, they really have seemed to get some pretty big points decreases, lots of core units going down by amounts that I'd say are meaningful, and this should set them in very good stead until the Codex comes out. That one's built to be the last one of spring, giving them another 7 detachments in addition to their index one. Hopefully it does wind up being one of the more interesting and well written of the 40k codexes of 10th. While we're on the subject of Chaos, I thought I'd just briefly mention the Chaos Battle Force giveaway that'll be the one for the start of May. Only a few days left to enter for this one, and there'll basically be 3 copies of both sets of the Chaos Battle Forces posted out, so the Dread Talons plus the Veterans of the Long War box sets should start you off with around about 1500 points worth of Chaos. 3 channel viewers will watch that, and you can enter via either supporting on the Patreon page or supporting via social media. If you're interested in a bit more details as to this one, stick around till the end of the video where I'll talk about it once more. Back to the subject in hand though, and let's talk about the Chaos datasheet changes. First up, and perhaps one of the single best buffs out of any of them, is this one to the Legionaries. They drop down to just 80 points from 90 points, which makes them kind of a spectacularly good troops choice now in my opinion. Unlike some battle line units in Warhammer 40k, these guys were already really quite good. They've got strong combat for a troops unit with 2 heavy melee weapons in a unit of 5, and per unit of 5 you can also get 1 either heavy or special weapon, plus replace 1 bolt gun with a balefire tome. It really can be quite dangerous for a fairly cheap troops unit, and then they back that all up with really quite good stacking damage boosts. The dark packs are pretty good, and they also get their built-in rerolls, rerolling wound rolls of 1 or all wound rolls against enemies on objective markers, which is really big. For 90 points they were already seen playing competitive lists. At 80 points they've just taken a really big points decrease, and I feel like at this point they're pretty auto-include, hard to go too far wrong with. A unit with really good objective control for taking those points in the first place, and while they're doing that they're genuinely quite tanky with the power armoured bodies, and for a unit that has both of those things, they really are surprisingly dangerous. Using some Chaos Rhinos to get there might not be the worst idea in the world, and there might be a reasonable enough alternative to Chosen for Chaos Lords now, baby. I feel like now they're this much cheaper than them, you really could go for the budget option with the Power Fists. Overall, Legionaries are looking great, a battle line to make Chaos proud. I feel like they're a hard unit to go wrong with now. Otherwise, plenty of other Chaos in power armor went down as well though. The Raptors dropped down by 5 points from 90 points to 85, maybe mirroring the Jump Intercessors for the Space Marines a little bit in being really quite cheap jump troops. Again, they did have some competitive play, but maybe a little bit more niche than some, generally being cheap fast skirmish infantry that are quite good against certain targets but maybe less good against others, handy enough for deep striking in or being fast movers to do secondary objectives. Again, a solid enough points decrease keeps these guys very relevant. They're still okay with dark packs for the damage dealing again. Harken World Claimer isn't unusable, and they'll certainly like the upcoming Jump Pack Lord for some free stratagems and things. Perhaps their main competitor for the fast-moving, cheap unit type role are the Chaos Bikers, which were already quite good for that, and went down even more. Next up, the Cultist Chaff again seem like really big winners, 50 points down from 55, so around a 9% decrease there. Again, already absolutely used in competitive lists, often with multiple units. They bring sticky objectives to the board for a very cheap investment, which is just nice to have on the table. Mark your home field objective with that, and then hopefully have some squads heading towards the midfield to do the same. At just 50 points for a unit in general, it does make them one of the better options for doing things like screening or doing actions for secondary objectives, and they do have a whole bunch of special weapons for some genuine threat to the unit. Again, a mark of Nurgle making them a bit more relevant with things like the grenade launcher. They can still kill a fair few light infantry when they need to. I think at 50 points they're near enough auto-include for one squad to mark your home objective with sticky objectives for dead cheap, and maybe hold it after that. Lots of lists do seem to use far more of them as well, and they'll be saving a few points there for use elsewhere. Next up, for some more dangerous damage dealers, we have the Possessed. They dropped down from 140 to 130 points. Really quite a big win for the faction there, I think, as they just tend to be popular units as solid, easy to use damage dealers. They're just a very nice combination of move quite quickly with their 9-inch move, generally fairly tough with 3 wounds at toughness 5 and their invulnerable save, and then really quite brutal melee damage with stacked attacks at strength 5 and damage 2, or with devastating wounds whenever they make a dark pact. They're particularly savage if you make them undivided and then use the 1 command point stratagem to b-roll wound rolls, as you're pretty guaranteed to get a whole chunk of devastating wounds out of that. Again, I feel like this is probably enough to tip them from being sort of mid to really quite good. I feel like a lot more people are going to be using these over Chosen compared with before. Hard to go wrong with infantry units that are fast, tough and dangerous, and they can get some good value out of a Master of Possession if you'd like to. Seems like between the Legionaries, Cultists and the Possessed, looks like the new Chaos Combat Patrol set might be a bit more tempting than it was before. Next up, we've got the Havocs, which got a really big points decrease. They went down from 135 points to 120, so a big 11% drop there. Again, I would have rated these guys as kind of mid Chaos Space Marine firepower, not awful by any stretch of the imagination, but not one of the most commonly selected firepower units, not versus things like Obliterators, Forge Fiends, or Predators or things. Still though, something like a Nurgle Marks unit of las cannons could definitely put in some very good work on anti-tank duties, and there's plenty of flexibility if you preferred other targets. They've got some good advantages for a fire support unit. They're not dependent on the heavy keywords, so you can happily walk them around, plus they even ignore modifiers like stealth when they do draw a bead on those kind of targets. And I feel like the general whole setup for them is just a lot more acceptable at 120 points. Their damage output is genuinely very good. They're still going to be not the hardest units to take down, as they're more standard Chaos Space Marines. I guess the toughness 5 helps them out at least a little bit there, but you're still going to feel the loss of every model. But they definitely have the damage output to make their impact felt even with 1 turn of shooting. A unit of 4 with las cannons and the Nurgle pack does around about 10 wounds to, say, a Space Marine Gladiator tank out of cover. Maybe a particularly choice target for you there, but they'll definitely put in work against anything that's harder to take out to. Per point, their damage output is likely to be a bit better than the now soon to be feared Vindicator, though given that they're far easier to kill, I feel like that thing might still be the go-to. In any case, 120 points feels like it's enough to return them to fairly competitive for me. Next up, the Chaos Terminators drop down from 195 points to 185. They're a big tough power combo type unit, so if you want a fairly maximal points investment Chaos Space Marine unit, you can get these. They can certainly be a massive terrifying Death Star unit with Abaddon in tow. They don't seem to have been quite as favoured in recent times versus things like Chosen jumping out of Rhinos, though a points decrease probably helps narrow the gap on that. I'm still not sure if they're going to be one of the single most standout damage dealers, given that they're still competing with the Chosen and with Possessed, but seems like a good step in the right direction, and they do seem like a strong usable unit. As mentioned briefly with the Raptors, I feel like one of the low-key big winners of the update might be the Chaos Bikers. They're down from 85 points to 75 and were already somewhat usable. I had certainly seen some people playing them in competitive lists. They're just really quite a nice combo of fast, tough, and genuinely still quite dangerous. At 25 points per model, I think they're fairly standout. 3 wounds at toughness 5, move 12 inches and can still charge after that. They get twin combi bolters per bike, plus Astartes chainswords, melter guns, and a power fist on the sergeant. They've got okay threat for the points both at range and melee. Again, I suspect they're probably not going to be mainline damage dealers for the most part, and they don't have any character options to lead them. But for the cheap points cost, with all the dark packs enhancing all that damage, they seem fairly godly for 75 points. Maybe it's just a shame that they don't have their updated models yet, which I'm sure are coming at some point. I think that'll make people feel even better about picking some up. Perhaps one of the single biggest winners for the update, though, is the Chaos Vindicator. This one dropped down from 190 points to 175, and was definitely already a competitive unit that had a lot of big threats. As with the rest of the shooting things, pick up a Mark of Nurgle and do the sustained hits pact, and you've got sustained hits on a 5+, so you average as many hits as you have shots. The Vindicator will therefore be punching away with d6 plus 3 hits on average, strength 14, AP 3, and damage d6 with a blast keyword. That's enough shots to be relevant against infantry, and massive threat and multi-damage and good AP to be relevant against tanks. You also get the Havoc launcher and the combi weapon. Its short range is sort of countered by the fact that it can happily fire in combat, and it's at least fairly tanky with toughness 11 and a 2+ save. In cover, these things aren't easy to take out. After the points changes, they really look utterly brutal. Might be one of the single go-to Chaos Firepower units going forward. Using those sustained hits on a 5+, you can average around 13 wounds to a gladiator tank out of cover, about 6 wounds to a land raider in cover, or around about 4 dead standard space marines in cover. There's pretty much nothing in the game that you can point this thing at that isn't going to feel it, and it's even somewhat fast at 10-inch movement. I strongly suspect that we'll be seeing these things in competitive lists in multiples going forward. Otherwise, for Demon Engine things, the Venom Crawler went down to 110 points from 120. It was maybe a bit more niche pre-update, though definitely had its place. It spams out a whole bunch of Strength 6, AP 1 and Damage 2 attacks, both at range and in melee, 18 attacks in total between the two if it gets to activate maximally. Pretty good at shredding things like standard Space Marines and any Horde type infantry, but will struggle a bit against tougher stuff. For a somewhat fast moving, 12-inch moving Outrider, seems absolutely fine to delete enemy infantry formations. Seems a usable enough gun turret to have moving up alongside the flanks of the army. The Morphine dropped down from 155 points to 145, again maybe a little bit on the niche side pre-update, but usable enough if you wanted a big vehicle with dedicated anti-tank melee. I do feel like maybe a bit of a Chaos Space Marine distraction Carnifex, something that the enemy probably will have enough time to deal some damage to before it makes a charge, given that it has to go around terrain, but might give them difficult decisions with whether or not they try and shoot this down or go after other things, and if they don't destroy this, it is going to hit something pretty hard. 145 points maybe feels a bit more in line with its abilities. I'm not sure it's going to be super standout compared with all the other good stuff, but it certainly makes you feel a bit better about taking one if you were anyway. If you can spare a command point, I guess it can charge pretty far with a Mark of Slanesh. Getting advance and charge on that thing is pretty big. Finally, for characters, there were just a few changes. Cypher went down to 90 points from 105. Nice to have a bit more of a credible lone operative for Chaos Marines, as I thought 105 was just too much for what he did, really. Lone operatives are just pretty handy to have. They can't be short, can do annoying objective things, and screen out parts of the army where the opponent just can't interact with them. Cypher in particular brings some fairly big damage in the shooting phase with a whole bunch of spammed pistol shots. Nasty enough against enemy infantry, and maybe perhaps particularly disruptive, as if you try and shoot him at range then he fires right back at you, given that you can only target him within 12 inches, so within his pistol range. He also comes with one of those Ruinous Stratagem abilities preloaded, which has quite a lot of value just in itself. I feel like between that and just having an annoying and somewhat threatening lone operative, there's enough to justify his cost now. I'd probably say not absolutely auto-include, but I feel like plenty of people might put him back on the table at 90 points rather than 105. At least percentage-wise, he got the single biggest points decrease out of anything here. Lastly, for the characters, the Heretic Astartes Demon Princes both dropped down 15 points, the foot version now 165 points, the winged version 180. I think these two are pretty reasonable to target for a points cut. They maybe didn't really feel quite on the same sort of power level of Demon Princes of old. Okay anti-elites, but can struggle with toughness 10 or more. The on-foot one can grant stealth to nearby infantry and get some built-in rerolls. The winged one's main trick is big mortal wound impact hits as well as being faster. If you've got a fair bit of health left, you could be slamming into the enemy with a whole bunch of mortal wounds before any of his main attack dice are rolled. I feel like it's probably been enough to raise them from pretty niche to kind of okay with the change. Maybe the most tempting way to run one might be Slanesh with the Intoxicating Elixir for the 5+ Feel No Pain, plus Marcus Slanesh helps with speed and advance and charge where needed. The Feel No Pain's quite a big deal if you can be shot directly like these guys can. Overall, I think it's really quite a lot of good stuff for the Chaos Space Marines. Lots of core units getting meaningful points cuts, though as ever with Games Workshop, plenty of stuff that felt like it either got missed or neglected. Stuff that wasn't good before and then received no changes. Astor the Archithane really seems to have ticked off the other Chaos Gods. He hasn't been good since his datasheet came out in 9th edition and remains with no points changes here. Fingers crossed his unique detachment does something for him in the Codex. Will be interesting to see what sort of techno-heresy that brings. The Lord Discordant was once a powerhouse in previous editions, but now remains just overcosted. The Thelgor Beastmen are just so much worse than things like Cultists for the chaff nuisance role. The Defiler I think could use a points drop if any of the other demon engines were. It's not awful with general purpose damage output, but it still feels like it's fairly bottom of the barrel. And for the Helldrake, as ever, Games Workshop really don't want to make any flyers of any sort good this edition. It's not likely to get good anytime soon as a result. Overall though, definitely not everything's got great, but I feel like these points changes are enough to bring Chaos Space Marines back in really quite a big way. There's loads of choices that are looking downright powerful. Perhaps the single most obvious and intimidating being the Nurgle Vindicators. Lining up 3 of them on the battle line is just monumentally scary. With a good roll and a flurry of sustained hits, you could delete entire Land Raiders in one shot if you rolled hot, but their average damage turn on turn is just likely to be pretty impressive. I certainly want a good number of both Legionaries and Cultists at those new lower points costs. They're both good for objectives, the Legionaries to go forward, the Cultists to mark things. Bikes seem pretty stand out for the fast interference type role. Possessed look like they might rival Chosen again for mainline damage dealers, and Raptors, Terminators, Havocs, Cypher and the Demon Princes are rated all usable, though I feel like maybe a few of the first things might be the things that get picked first. Overall, I'd guess that this might be enough to see Chaos Space Marines back towards the top end of Warhammer 40k, as opposed to the bottom end as they've been languishing in for a while. I guess we'll see if that's the case though when tournaments start to get played in earnest. I guess it might not be all that long while we have these points and rules active. The Codex will be out shortly, and we'll have another 7 different ways to play Chaos Space Marines. If Games Workshop do keep the points costs for these units though, then it could be pretty encouraging for Chaos being pretty interesting in that. I feel like often when they do Codex releases, not that many things tend to change from Index to Codex, maybe just a few units that get actual datasheet changes. Let me know your thoughts though. What do you think is looking good for the Dark Gods so far out of this update? Look forward to hearing your ideas down in the comments. Finally, as mentioned, and while we're on the subject of Chaos, I'll just talk about that channel giveaway for the Chaos Battle Force once more. The Auspex Tactics May giveaway is to aim to set up 3 channel viewers with a fairly big Chaos army, 1 copy of both of the Battle Force box sets, so that's the Dread Talons with the new Jump Lord, Raptors, Cultists, and the Demon Prince, and the Veterans of the Long War box set, with the maybe more core Chaos Space Marine army with the Lords on foot, 10 Terminators, Legionaries, Possessed, and Chosen. Games Workshop did say they designed them to go hand in hand if people wanted both. As ever with the channel giveaways, there's 2 different ways to enter, links down in the video description, and it's one or the other. Either support the channel via Patreon or support it via social media. For channel Patreon supporters, it is the main thing that allows me to keep these videos coming quite so regularly, so any support here is massively appreciated. It gets you automatic entry into the prize giveaways each and every month. Otherwise, you can enter by supporting on social media completely for free, subscribe to the YouTube channel and like the Facebook page, and then to actually enter the draw, a Facebook giveaway post appears on the 1st of May. Respond to that post with a photo of any 40k mini or imagery, with your name and the date handwritten within the same photo. The last bit's just to stop Facebook bots and spammers, and make sure the prizes go to real hobbyists. Then when all the entries are in, the draw is done with a random number generator, and is announced on the channel update video here on YouTube around the 4th of May. Obviously we don't have the official release date for when these come out yet. The boxes will be posted as soon as I receive my order of them. Fingers crossed Games Workshop won't keep the Dark Gods waiting too long. In any case, feel free to check out the Patreon and the Facebook links down in the video description. There will be further giveaways of a similar sort of scale each and every month. In any case, let me know what you make of the Chaos Space Marine balance updates. Look forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments below. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I'm sure we'll have plenty more for the balance data slate over the next day or two. A few more faction focuses and overall thoughts. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos on the channel, as well as entry to the giveaways, the Patreon page does have a few other benefits. Things like your name in the credits here for $5 backers or more, access to a Discord role, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and seeing certain videos early from time to time. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case though, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.